Hi and welcome back. In this video we're going to go ahead and take a look at where we left off in the previous video, which was demonstrating how to integrate Twitter inside a 6-web application. In this video I'd like to just demonstrate that we have set up an instance of 6web on IIS. Here it is. I've called it 6web Twitter, and it's prompted me to log in. This is a expander edition of version that I've copied onto my computer, extracted it, created a web application in IIS, and have pre-configured the web config file to connect to my test database. Now it should be noted that you can install this. You can install the standard version and do all of the modifications that we're going to be doing with both or either the standard SuperOffice web client or the expander edition. All the changes that we'll be doing over the course of the next videos are capable in both. Okay, so if I look at my web config file for this application, I'll scroll down and just kind of note a couple things. We haven't yet created this file, but I've added it here to the dynamic load section. This assembly is going to contain the classes that are necessary in order to conduct the data management or the view model capabilities behind the scenes. This includes the archive provider as well as the data handler associated with the pages that we're going to create. If I continue to scroll down, I have enabled login, and I've just set up my test database here. One thing I want to note here is if we scroll down to the client application section, we have a name for the application and then we have an instance name for that application. Web client and web. These are important when it comes down to storing custom configuration files or custom pages for our application. If we look down at the client configuration provider section, we'll see we have the capability to specify a custom path, and this custom path is where the custom configuration files are going to reside. What this means is I can go ahead and copy the existing application configuration files such as so application configuration.config, copy that to this directory, and this file, the file that resides inside this folder, is going to override the default one, which is located in the website's app directory web client / web directory. Now inside this folder here, 6web3385, I call this by the build number, I also have to have a folder construct very similar to this. So inside 6web338 I have to have a folder called web client, and then inside that folder I have to have another folder called web, and inside the web directory is where all of my configuration files are going to reside. So let's take a look at the 6web3385 folder, and this is going to contain another folder called web client. This maps to the application name defined in the web config file here. Now we have to, inside that, create another folder called web. Call this web. Great. Now in here is actually where I want to store all of my custom configuration files. And then this is useful when an upgrade occurs. These files will not be touched, so they will remain intact. Any changes that you make to these files will still exist. Now this is not necessary. You can still create all of the files that we're going to create and modify all of the existing files in the website's directory. However, it's probably best to just go ahead and move those out into a custom folder. So here's the website, and I'm going to drill into here, and this is where all of the original files reside, all of the original configuration files for the application. The files that we're interested in are going to be those SO application configuration file. This file contains all of the main pages as well as all of the dialogues that are defined in the system. As well, down below, it defines all of the currents that make up the current system within the web application as well. What we want to do now is copy this file into our custom folder as well as any other file that we're going to be using as well. This includes the SO application configuration. We're also going to be, because we're creating an archive control, we're going to be adding in new archive columns. So we'll select the archive column list, the SO archive control link info types config file. I'll scroll down. We'll also grab the SO navigator panel so that we can add in the new button on the left hand side, and object mapping. Object mapping allows us to declare things such as data handlers. So I'll just right click and I'll choose to copy these, and then we'll navigate back to the C drive so that we can put these inside of our custom directory. I'll just copy these here. Now these files will override any of the defaults. Any changes that you make to SO application or object mapping, you'll have to restart IIS in order to have the application recognize those changes. This is also true for the SO archive link info types folder and the SO archive column list folder. Essentially, I define these as system files, and SO navigator panel is a configuration file that defines all of the buttons on the left hand side of the application. Now this is what I call just a page or a panel configuration file. Anytime you make changes to a panel configuration file or a page file, the IIS does not need to be reset. Those changes will be recognized instantly the next time you refresh the page. Okay, so if I do an IIS reset now at this point, the web application will no longer utilize the default pages, but will use these pages copied over into the custom directory. This can be observed by navigating to the website and verifying that. If I now come to the website and I log in, it might take a little bit longer to log in than normal since I just reset IIS. Once we're logged in, we'll be able to, let's say the navigator bar here says company. And to verify that these files now override the defaults, I'll go ahead and open up the navigator panel again and then change company, the caption that you see for the company. I'll change that and I'll just add a 2 here just to verify that. I'll come back to the website and I'll just refresh the page, and we'll see now the company label has the 2 before it. So that is just one simple way to at least tell that the application is observing those changes, observing the new files. Now what we can do is go back into our folder and begin to create the new files that will make up our pages. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to create a new file here, and I'll call this SO Twitter page.config. I'll go ahead and change that so it will be a config file, and I'll just copy that, and now this one we'll call SO Twitter login page. Same thing, I'll just copy that, and then this last one I'll call SO Twitter entry dialog page. Great. And this will represent our 3 dialogues in the application. One, the SO Twitter page, will be the main panel inside the application. The login page will represent the dialog that appears when the current user is unable to discover Twitter credentials in the database. And the SO entry dialog page will be the dialog that appears in order to create a new tweet or to retweet somebody's previous tweet. Those are the three files that we'll create. Now what we'll want to do is to go inside the SO application configuration page and declare these pages in our application. So let's go ahead and just drop this down so that we can see this. Now I'm going to create a new main page. This is going to be SO Twitter page. The naming conventions here, everything inside the SO configurations or the web folder has a prefix of SO, and if it's a page or a dialog, it always has a suffix of page. When you come into SO application configuration.config file, always make sure to lowercase everything. And here you no longer have the prefix or the suffix, so it's just to call the root page name, in this case Twitter. Next we're going to go ahead and add in a couple dialogues. So I'm just going to shamelessly copy and paste from the sale, and I'll call this one Twitter login page, Twitter login, and then the next one will be Twitter entry dialog. Okay. As far as the dialog size, I know that based on the construction of our example that I've already shown you, the Twitter login page is going to be like 130 pixels high, and the width is going to be 300 pixels. Yeah. Then we'll go ahead, the entry dialog, the height for that is going to be 150 pixels, and then the width is going to be, let's just say, 500 pixels. Okay. Now that we have that defined, I know also that in our system we're going to require a new current. Anytime you select a row inside an archive control, you are essentially changing the ID of the underlying current. So here I am looking at a company with a contact dialog, the contact panel, and here inside the person archive control, it lists people. Now every time I click on a new person, it updates the current ID for the currently selected person, and that's how it knows what to change up here in order to see different previews for different current people. This mini panel has subscribed to the person current, and anytime the current person changes, the current ID for the person changes, it will automatically update itself. And we also want that type of behavior underneath our Twitter system as well, because each row inside our Twitter archive control is going to have a unique tweet ID assigned to it, and that we will leverage in order to query again against Twitter for the text of that query to populate it in the entry dialog if it in fact is going to be a retweet or anything of that sort. Okay, so I've gone ahead and taken the liberty, and now if we scroll down to the bottom of our SO application dialog, we'll see that there is a current defined down here called tweet. We're going to also specify this of type history, so anytime we want to access it inside the system, we'll utilize a history item, and all of the currents by default in the system leverage the SO protocol provider, which essentially is used to get and set each current in the system. So we've made the changes, we've added our main page, we've added in our two dialogues, and now we've added our current. As long as we restart IIS, now those new changes should take effect. we should be able to log back into the application without any errors. So let's go ahead and try that. I'll just come up here, I'll enter in order to refresh the page. Since we made some changes and did an IIS reset, we'll now have to log back into 6Web. Okay, the login dialog appears. There was no errors there. Let's just make sure I can still log in without any problem. Okay, great. And that's working as we'd expect.